welcome to episode 4 of Chained, and hello, Jack.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Chained, and hello, Jack.
Why are you doing that, Jack?
Why are you doing that, Jack?
Oh, I see what you're doing.
I see what you're doing.
Yeah, Jack, is this a clue about the film that we're watching today?
Yes, a little hint into the pick of this week for episode 4 of Chained. Carl, I'll let you do the honours.
Yeah, so continuing our chain, which is now a few links strong, and a couple of interesting things that came out of this one. But yeah, we are in episode 4, and my pick coming off the back of Last Action Hero from episode 3 was to pick F. Murray Abraham, who played the sort of turncoat CIA guy, and basically we are going with Guillermo del Toro's American debut, which is Mimic. So yeah, very excited to be talking about this one. Like we said last episode, it's another 90s film, and I think we're gonna have a good chat on this one, Jack.
I'm very excited about this one because I'd only seen it once, so like I kind of went into it with fresh eyes. Let's go with that, fresh, yeah. Because I hadn't seen it so long, so it was kind of like a lot of it I couldn't even remember. It hadn't made a lasting impact, but my God, rewatching it, I had a good time. So I'm looking forward to speaking about it for sure.
Fantastic. Yeah. So welcome. Hopefully we're welcoming some new listeners and viewers today. So, thanks for joining. If you are unfamiliar with Chains, so we are linking actors and movies together through shared actors. So we're four links deep. And at the end of this episode, Jack will surprise me with his pick and his actor. And that's always one of my favorite bits. So really looking forward to that. We're going to start with a little bit first of what we've been watching, and then we're going to go into our review of Mimic, and then we will wrap up with a bit of a discussion about F. Murray Abraham. It was an interesting film, but a great actor and a lot to say. So yeah, we'll crack on with that, and so I think let's get going, Jack. What do you reckon?
Absolutely. Let's do some housekeeping and find out what I absolutely love, what you've been watching recently.
So my first pick this time is one that I was so annoyed I missed in the cinema last year, but I finally got around to seeing it, and actually got to see it on the biggest TV that I know someone owns, which was perfect because I got to see John Wick 4, and
wow,
I felt like a long time coming because I did really want to go and see it. I think the 3-hour running time put me off going to the cinema, but I'm actually massively regretting it now. You seen it?
Yeah, oh yeah, and I went to. I was one of the lucky ones that went to see it in the cinema in IMAX, no doubt. And right off the bat, I think me and my friend both like literally almost like shit ourselves as soon as the movie starts and that fist hits the punch bag, surround sound in IMAX. My God. So yeah, very glad that you've seen it. Good that you didn't see it in IMAX, but what did you think?
Yeah, man. It was exactly kind of what I wanted from the franchise. A franchise that, frankly, started with me watching, I think, the first one on a plane, because it was just an action movie, to becoming one of the best franchises of recent years. It's a series that has absolutely no right to be just as epic and as kind of world building and just cinematically just such an achievement. All the same director, same writers, they've just built this incredible thing out of nothing in a world of Marvel and DC and Terminator sequels and everything
Absolutely.
else. It's just amazing to have seen a franchise that has blossomed in the last few years that you can basically say is something from the last decade. And brilliant film. Absolutely loved it. It's insane on a action level. Like every time I see one of those films, you think I've seen it all now. Like I can't understand how they can top it, but they just somehow manage it. And the action scenes are so imaginative, so incredibly well choreographed, just bonkers at this point.
Yeah.
It stopped around halfway through the second film being realistic in any way.
It's I totally agree. It's funny because one of the reasons I loved the first one so much, and when you think of how long ago the first one was, literally all it was a guy like loses his dog and goes on a rampage, and he just doesn't stop. But it's very realistic. He just goes for headshots. He doesn't mess about. He doesn't like knock out any witticisms. He's just driven. And I thought that's why I love this. I mean, that's why I like the first one. But like you say, the second it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. But he still seems to hold the same sensibilities. He just goes for headshots. He only ever shoots someone outside the head to expose someone to get a headshot. But like you say, the choreography in that movie, I think someone had a criticism about it, saying that they didn't like the dance scene. It was ridiculous that no one in that club noticed this big epic fight happening. And I was like, but that's not why it was done that way. It was shot that way because it just looks absolutely gorgeous while they're fighting and everyone's dancing around. So you've kind of got to but yeah, I'm rambling, but that's exactly why I love the movie. It's the most epic one yet.
It's they've also done an incredible thing of bringing in lots of action actors who have a point to prove, or kind of maybe never quite been appreciated enough, and you know, unlike the Expendables or something, which just feels tired, like this just feels so modern, but in such a beautiful way. That the production design and the lighting are some of the best I've seen in any movies in recent memory. I remember the finale of part 3 where they were fighting in the Continental, where they had all kind of liquid monitors and all that sort of stuff. It carries on with that vibe. Like you say, things like the German nightclub scene. There's there's that scene in the Osaka hotel. Like every location has a fantastic look, beautifully lit, beautifully shot. You see everything. The choreography is just world class, and then you bring in
that hot suit.
Yeah, and then you bring in on top of that, you know, you bring in people like Donnie Yen and Scott Adkins. I'm a huge, like, just for the record, like, to see Scott Adkins get a moment of quality in a massive movie was a great one for me, because like he's a Midlands hero, and basically like doesn't get due, I think.
Yeah.
And so he was fantastic, and that fight in the club, you know, the even down to the fact that because he's such a good martial artist, but he carried off like being a kind of large man, you know, and just everything about it. But even starting off, like you say, there was that kind of epic build at the beginning, and you get the scene that's almost like out of Lawrence of Arabia, and it's so sweeping, and they just knew exactly what they were doing. Like, it's almost like you feel that they probably storyboarded like every frame of that movie.
Absolutely. It is what it is, and it, like you say, it has no right to be as good as it is, because I'm someone that's grown tired of movies that just overkill franchise. Fast and the Furious, Mission Impossible, just getting to see at this point. But I'll always have time for John Wick, and I think a lot of that's credited to Keanu Reeves, to be honest. The type of reputation he's built off screen as well as on, just a really nice guy, and just totally commits. And I've just got so much time for that man. I'll follow him anywhere.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. And I mean, you know, when you look back at his action career, arguably he's top 3, you know what I mean? Like, when you look, going back to, you know, Point Break, one of my favorite action films, you know, Matrix, the guy has smashed out some incredible action films, but never really is seen in that kind of light, I feel, you know. But he, considering the guy's pushing 60 now, I mean, the moves and that he's doing in these films, it was it wrapped up incredibly well, I thought. So yeah, fantastic, absolutely loved it, amazing time. If you've loved the first few 3, you know, watch it, because you're certainly not going to be disappointed. The only regret I've got is I haven't watched it with my dad, who is a massive John Wick fan as well.
Right.
So when he's over next, I am 100% watching that one.
Awesome stuff. That's class. Well, I guess, I'm sort of, I was going to say it's sort of the same as yourself, in that I've been watching old movies, but I've just been on an absolute rewatching binge this month. So I haven't really watched anything new. I've just been absolutely caning movies that I absolutely love. And one movie that I haven't seen in a while, but I always remember it being a good time. So I knew that it wasn't going to disappoint. It's on Disney Plus at the moment. Broken Arrow. John Woo's Broken Arrow, with John Travolta and Christian Slater.
And how's that hold up? Because I saw that in the cinema, and I don't think I've seen it since.
It holds up, and it doesn't. It's still a very good time, but my God, there's certain things that are just thrown. It's very woo, but there's certain things just thrown in there. Like John Travolta is the lead, and Christian Slater. It's very sort of, these guys are hot now. So because John Travolta had the resurgence with Pulp Fiction, so he was a big name again. So they just threw these people in. And he plays it very similar to, funnily enough, another John Woo film, how he plays his version of Nick Cage in Face Off. Very sociopathic.
You don't know what you're doing, do you? This is out of control! Hush! Hush! Stop your vehicle!
But one of the things that's so funny, like, it was probably seen as really cool at the time, but every scene he's just lighting a new cigarette, but he makes a point that he's got a cigarette below smoking people's faces, and everyone's like, he's a pilot, and he goes into his captain's office, and he's like, you can't smoke in here. He's like, oh, sorry, forgot I had it, sort of thing, stubs out in his hands. Like, they make such a point, like, look at me, I'm smoking, look how cool I am. It's just so ridiculous.
That reminds me, actually, yeah, because I remember at the time, anybody I knew who smoked thought he was the coolest man alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he does somehow. He's one of these people that looks exceptionally cool with a cigarette. I mean, he should have been French.
Got his aviator Ray-Bans on, and he's just constantly smoking in that movie, and it's just like, right on, like, yep, I get it. It's very of its time for that reason. Christian Slater is a leading man. It's one of those movies, like, you could have kind of cast anyone, but it's such a good story. Like, the sort of, like, broken arrows, the terminology they use when a nuke goes missing, and then he's like, I don't know what concerns me more, the fact we've lost one, or the fact that it happens so often they've got a name for it. So
that's great.
But very good time. Like I said, it's John Woo. The action's great. The one-liners are great. The John Travolta biting it in the end by one of the nuclear missiles going straight into him. Absolutely tremendous. It's got everything that you can. And yeah, he's just when
it came out. I very shortly before that discovered John Woo. I'd watched The Killer, and I think I'd watched Hard Boiled. Yeah. And so the idea that he was coming to America was just like the most exciting thing. And I feel like, I mean, maybe Face Off was his like American kind of classic, but absolutely. I feel like his stuff never quite lived up to what he'd done in Hong Kong. But I do remember having a really good time with that. And I think, to be honest, like I'm due a John Woo career.
Get involved in Broken Arrow. Absolutely, you won't be disappointed. It's a good time. If nothing else, it's a fun time.
I was also really a big fan of Christian Slater at that time. I think that was when Christian Slater was just at his kind of peak.
True Romance. Yeah,
he really was absolutely smashing it at that point. And it's good. Good memories of that. And I think it's a shame that John Woo's he sort of disappeared for a very long time. He did Redcliffe, and then he didn't do anything for a long time. And did you see that one that came out on Netflix, like at Christmas? I haven't seen it. I didn't even realise there was a John Woo film on Netflix until a friend was telling me.
No, I haven't seen it.
So it's like a Christmas action movie. I can't remember what it's called, but it's there's some Christmas action movie out on Netflix. I mean, this going back to our gripes about streaming. A John Woo movie has just landed, and literally, but I think it's got like a silent assassin kind of thing in it. But,
right.
John Woo very much missed. I wish he'd just do more, because the guy is bloody brilliant. And I mean, without him, to be honest, there probably wouldn't be John Wick, if we're honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's definitely, I think in Broken Arrow, there's so many things that were known as Woo trademarks that I didn't even realize, because obviously you've got the doves. There's always a moment where doves just have to fly. But like little things like two guns at the same time, like jumping through the edge. There's little things, and it's just like, but they're just in Broken Arrow because it's not because this is an action movie. It's because it's a director trademark. It's a Woo trademark. It's like, shit, like, man, this guy has had so much influence on action cinema.
Is Broken Arrow the one where he's got one gun and then he kicks like a floorboard or something, and a 6-shooter pops up in his hand, and then he jumps through the air shooting? He's got
a 6-shooter on a revolver. He's got two different guns, and he's running, jumping through the air and shooting. But yeah, it's so Woo. Absolutely brilliant.
I mean, and the thing is, one of the other Woo isms was the two good guy, bad guy, facing off very closely, shooting at each other and never hitting, even though they can kill everybody else on the planet, but they can't hit each other. And in John Wick 4, there was literally a scene like that during that. There's a scene at the Champs-Élysées, Triumph, where they were just shooting over cars, and they're shooting at each other, and it's like, how badass John Wick is, and yet he's not hitting this other guy, and the other guy's not hitting him. And I literally at the moment thought, that's such a John Woo little nod,
I love it.
So yeah, absolutely. He's had a huge impact on action cinema. Great shout. I hadn't thought about that film in years. Yeah, that'd be
Get
a fun
involved.
movie.
It's on Disney Plus. Anyone listening, I can't imagine they're going to be taking it off anytime soon, because that's not how Disney Plus operates. But anyone that's got it that hasn't seen it, or even if you have seen it, get involved. It's a fun time. What else have you been watching, Carl?
So my second final choice for this episode is I watched a film on, talking of Netflix, funny enough, it was on Netflix and I'd not heard of it before. A friend recommended it, said, we were just going, right, let's watch a kind of post-apocalyptic film, with Fallout coming out and that sort of stuff. And post-apocalypse is like my genre, possibly my favorite genre. I love stuff in that genre. And he picked a film I'd never even heard of from 2022 called Vesper. Have you seen Vesper?
I have not seen Vesper. Tell me more.
Yeah, so it's a British, super low budget post-apocalyptic film, and it's basically a bit like, it comes across a bit like a YA adaptation, but I don't think it is based on a book. I think it is an original story. I haven't looked that deeply into it, to be honest. But the idea is it follows this world where kind of ties in, actually, funnily enough, with what we're talking about in Mimic, but a world where people have genetically modified the ecosystem, and it goes horribly wrong. And so basically,
as it always does,
you reach this classic sort of setup where you've got the rich are living in citadels and the poor are living out in the countryside farming, but at constant danger from this world around them. Now, you imagine kind of the world being a bit like Pandora on a super low budget, but kind of done incredibly well. Like, so you know how in like Avatar, everything's trying to kill them. Like, the world is dangerous and kind of beautiful at the same time. This is very, very similar sort of setup. And you get this character called Vesper. She's a 13-year-old girl who happens to be like a bit of a science boffin, lives with her dad, who is incredibly sick, but trying to find a kind of cure for the seeds that they use, and kind of that could potentially have a knock-on effect for the ecosystem around them. And that's kind of the setup. And then it's a kind of a bit of a classic post-apocalypse film. You've got like a community run by a kind of tyrant played by Eddie Marsden, who's her uncle. He's a skeezy. I love skeezy Eddie Marsden. Like, he's a great actor. He can do nice and horrible, but when he's horrible, I really like him. He's like a real shitbag, it's sort of, the setup isn't like, you probably think from that doesn't sound massively original, but what really made it stand out and really blew me away was the production design. It's just incredible. It's only 5 million, I think, but it's like every penny is on the screen. Other than Eddie Marsden, there's no other famous people in it, mostly sort of bit part actors and things like that, and all British cast. But it's got an incredible original sort of look, and this really nice, almost Cronenberg kind of fleshy mixed with technology feel. So the coolest thing in it is her dad is really, really sick and he's bedridden, but they've got the technology, obviously before the world failed, to have these kind of remote flying drones. It looks a bit like a crash helmet, and it just flies around. It's got a smiley face drawn on it. But it's her dad, and he flies around everywhere with her. So she can talk to him, but he can't do anything. He's literally just a head, basically. He's just a floating crash helmet, effectively. But when she has to fix him at some point in the film, she delves in, and it's just like a fleshy goo inside the helmet. And I just thought they put so much effort into what could have just been like a phoned-in, cheapo, British crappy film. It actually ended up really impressing me. The lead actress is a girl called Raffaella Chapman, who I think is only sort of 14, 15 at the time. Just another in this kind of generation of incredible British actors coming through. I'd never seen her before, but she's, outstanding. And I know, so Netflix came in for some criticism because of Damsel, and they've done things like Enola Holmes and these films where they've got these like strong, independent, young female leads. And I think a lot of the time you sort of feel it's a little, it's almost like it's a little forced. It's a little kind of, they're trying to be, I hate woke, but it's, people accuse them of being a little bit woke, a little bit, This film had that potential to just be a really bad, like, isn't she a brilliant science boffin, 13-year-old? But she's just such a great character. And there's this really lovely relationship with, there's a kind of, the whole story kicks off because there's a crash and there's a survivor from the crash and their relationship and kind of what she learns through this person. It's it's just really nicely done, really nicely acted, and it just played incredibly straight. It's almost utterly humorless, this film. There's
and I know you love that as well sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I love a laugh, but sometimes I just like a really grim film. You know, I mean, just a gritty. Not everything needs to have that Marvel witty bloody one-liners, and it just plays it really straight. So it's really, really strong recommend for me. I mean, it's a sort of 4.5. I loved it. I think just as a British post-apocalyptic entry, very, very good. I would put it on a level with Girl with All the Gifts, which was another brilliant post-apocalyptic sort of British zombie film. You know, this isn't zombies. It is.
Where can me or anyone else that hasn't seen this, because it sounds amazing, so I'm definitely going to get involved. Where can I get involved?
Yeah, so it's a Netflix original, I think. So it's on Netflix. I think they funded it or bought it. It's one of the ones that they picked up. Yeah, so
awesome.
But yeah, really good. Vesper 2022. So yeah, Jack,
excellent.
Your second pick.
It's actually really funny. It's uncanny how we both have been watching post-apocalyptic things as of late. So I've been on an absolute rewatching binge. So I actually rewatched because my partner hadn't seen it, and I was like, "Well, you need to see it." Doomsday, Neil Marshall's Doomsday, movie that I'm a huge fan of. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah. I've owned it for ages on DVD, and I still haven't rewatched it, and I think I still haven't seen it since the cinema. I've probably had it about 20 years. So, how's it hold up?
I mean, I'm the exact same as you. I remember loving it, every inch of that movie when it came out, just because I was a horror child. I grew up, and I just anything with gore, I absolutely gravitated towards. So that's why I loved it when it first came out, but also because I loved Dog Soldiers and The Descent, and then he brought this, and I was like, well, I'm going to love this as well, obviously. But my God, does it hold up? It holds up so well. It's for anyone that hasn't seen it. It's about sort of like an alternate UK. Well, funnily, I say alternate, but it's like a virus breaks out, and they actually end up closing the border between England and Scotland. And it's just, it was an alternate England when it first came out, but it is uncanny how this resembles COVID when I was rewatching it. When they closed the border between Scotland and England, I was like, shit, like this virus is breaking out. I was just like, this is a bit weird. And but they find a potential cure in Scotland, so they send this agent spy in to retrieve the cure, sort of thing. But everyone's descended into madness in Scotland, so it goes into Glasgow, like the resort to cannibalism and what.
We're gonna catch them, hook them, and eat them.
And whatnot. So she takes a squad and goes in there and has to put. I'm not going to spoil any more of the story, but I'll say exactly what vibes it has. It's a very much merge between sort of it's Escape from LA, it's Mad Max, it's Camelot. All of these things are in one movie. And funnily enough, I actually recently spoke to director Neil Marshall, who made Doomsday, and I picked his brain about it, and he gave me some really good insight because it's the same as yours. It's a full British cast, and he said for that reason movies don't get made like they used to, especially since streaming platforms. He was like, that movie wouldn't get made today because there's no big names in it. There's no big names in the leading cast or anything like that. Even the villain, like Bob Hoskins, is in it, but very much as a side character. So he said, like, for that reason, and what that movie is, and it's 3 different movies in one. He said this movie just wouldn't get made today. So for that reason, I think he said it's like his most favourite of his babies, sort of thing.
I got the impression from it because The Descent did so well that he immediately became like the director to watch, you know. And I would because I'd watched the same as you, Dog Soldiers and Descent, and then I got the impression that because that had done so well, they basically said to him, "What would you like to make?" And he just went, "I want to make this film, and I'm going to put everything in it that I ever wanted to make, just in case I never get to make another film." I don't know if he said anything about that, but that's how it felt to me. It was almost. I do remember thinking it was teetering on being overstuffed, like it was like pick a genre, man. But at the same time, it gave it a real. It's completely bonkers. I remember, isn't Sean Pertwee the cannibal leader or something? And he's just got a completely unhinged performance or something.
Sean Pertwee's actually the one that he's not in it long. I forget that it's a Geordie actor who plays the cannibal leader. or a Scottish actor, I believe. But Sean Pertwee actually gets eaten.
Oh, he's the one that gets eaten. That's right. Yeah, and he was in the film. I remember the guy just being, because he's all like big feather coat and war makeup.
Very Mad Max. Mad Max vibes. Yeah. I actually asked Neil as well, because this is Sean Pertwee got killed in Dog Soldiers as well. I said, just quickly, what have you got against Sean Pertwee? Because it's horrendous. You kill him off in every movie in horrendous ways. But yeah, no, it was very fun picking his brain about it, because it's a movie that I absolutely loved. And if anyone hasn't seen it, for a like post-apocalyptic perspective, but it's got British sensibilities, and I think that's why it didn't do too well over the States, because I watched it, funnily enough, before Mad Max. I got to the Mad Max party late on. So when I eventually got around to watching Mad Max, the originals, I was like, it's like a less funny Doomsday. And so I actually rated Doomsday higher. But it's because it didn't do too well in the States, because they didn't get the dark humor. They didn't get the British sensibilities. So I think after, he was very disheartened, because it was panned by critics, especially overseas.
Yeah, which was such a shame, because I mean, the British action movies are in very short supply. I've always thought that's something I wish we did more of. But you're absolutely right. Somebody puts out an action movie from Britain, it's like America shrugged. America puts out an action movie and everybody's like, ooh. So so I just think it's a shame, unless it's got James Bond in it. You can't get a British action movie, and even they're not really. Yeah, and I remember it had a cracking car chase, kind of homage to the Road at the end.
Yeah.
Really exceptionally long, kind of big, epic sort of car chase, doesn't it? Is it Rona Mitra?
Frankie Goes to Hollywood as well. To Frankie Goes to Hollywood. So it's just even more tremendous. Yeah.
Oh, Jack, you've hit me with two nostalgia bombs on this one. I think I'm going to have to check out both of those, because I own Doomsday.
Obviously, if you want to, Neil Marshall talk more than welcome. We'll chuck the links in this episode as well. Feel free to check out me picking Neil Marshall's brain.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, yeah, excellent. Well, great. Let's just get straight into Mimic. I'm really excited to talk about that. So we'll just go to ads. Great, and now we're back. So, Jack, we are going to be talking about the fourth link in the chain, Mimic, and I think this is a little bit of a surprise pick, given what you'd set up potentially for me at the last one. I think you were a bit surprised by this one, right? So, but hopefully, like me, you felt that actually it was a really interesting revisit, because I think that's why I picked it. I wanted to go back to this because I'm such a big Del Toro fan. I wanted to see how it's held up. So
I'm going to start by saying thank you, because I only seen it once and it didn't have that much of an impact, but it certainly did the second time round. And like you say, there's so many that you could have picked, given Last Action Hero, and it would have been movies that I definitely would have seen time and time again. So it's nice to sort of refresh the old brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to go to, and I'm sure this will come up, it was just to look at it from the perspective of who Del Toro has become and the kind of cultural presence he's become, and the fact that actually this was only his second film, and at that point he'd only done Kronos, which great movie, but it's one of those cases where in the 90s, I guess, foreign director makes good film, gets shot at Hollywood, and because of that, there's a lot of potentially interesting stuff to talk about, but I think it's fair to say it was a studio picture. It was a 90s studio picture. And, but yeah, when you look at then in the catalogue of where it came, I mean, he didn't make another film for nearly 4 or 5 years after this, but ever since he's been making like a movie every two or 3 years, so it's almost like
his style is all over this movie. Like it's his first, like you say, first American, but even back then, his style is all over this movie. It's tremendous.
Yeah, going back with the knowledge of kind of, he is genuinely one of the modern auteurs in that you can safely say, this is his movie. It's got all his hallmarks, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. I was looking up some stats online, and basically it's got about a 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, which sort of maybe later we can sort of see if that's fair. It was made on a budget of 30 million and only did 25 at the box office. So this was the 90s, notoriously a decade light on horror. This was also a light horror, I would say. So given kind of some of the other stuff that was to come after it, and certainly coming out of the 80s, the great horror decade, the 90s was not the the best one for that. And I think this was kind of very stereotypical for me of that. But yeah, second film, Del Toro, a cast of good character actors and well-known faces, led by Mira Sorvino, who was real hot stuff at the time. I remember, headlining a number of films at the time. So yeah, you'd seen it once, you said, and I never. I didn't see this at cinema. I saw this when it came out on home release, and I think maybe I've watched it twice, but it wouldn't have been for probably 20 years. So I guess we're both coming at this from the same perspective.
No, absolutely. And just a brief overview, it's very of its time, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. There's some things that made us smile. It's a very 90s movie. I think, like you said, coming out of the 80s, 90s, though, doesn't get the credit it deserves. I think the 90s didn't want to be the 80s, so it did a lot of experimental movies, especially when it came to horror. And obviously you had the merge between practical effects and CGI as we moved into the noughties, but I'm going to touch on that more later. Yeah. But this is a very 90s movie. Everyone in it's wearing like either a black sweater or a 3/4 length black leather jacket, just black. That's what everyone's wearing. It was the 90s after all. And I think, to be honest, that marries so well with Del Toro's like dark style. I think it just married beautifully. Yes, it was the 90s, but it was like a happy coincidence that it ended up looking the way it did. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's got the hallmarks of horror at the time. I mean, funny enough, we keep creating links back to other things we've said, but when we look at Alien 3, this looked very much like Alien 3, like the lighting, very, very sort of similar lighting. And I think that just became the kind of style during that period. Everything was quite sort of lots of, it was the X-Files, really. I think it was the X-Files influence and everything. When you look at this film, there's lots of torchlight in tunnels. It's a combination of that. And also, you also had David Fincher's Seven, which had only been out a couple of years. And that changed just the look of everything, which I think we said in the Alien 3 episode. There's that film had such a huge impact on everything afterwards that it all kind of looked a bit like Seven. But even within that kind of style, undoubtedly this is a Del Toro film.
So tell everyone that's not in the know, what is Mimic actually about?
Yeah, so Mimic, as I kind of referenced earlier when I was talking about Vesper, it's a genetic, a man playing God nightmare, I would say. That's it's one of the first of that genre where I think gene manipulation and DNA was such a hot topic in the 90s that this kind of naturally came out of that. It's humans playing God to stop an awful plague that has hit the children of New York, and I think there's a risk that it's going to go sort of wider than that. So basically, they discover right in the first few minutes there is a cockroach carrying infection that basically infects children, and it's very, very lethal. And so basically, a pair of scientists concoct a solution to this, which is to genetically modify some insects, cross their DNA, and release them to kill all the cockroaches. And the fail-safe plan that obviously cannot fail in any way is that the cockroach killers are meant to die after 6 months, and then problem solved. No cockroaches, no genetically modified insects, and of course that's it. And then nothing happens for the next 2 hours.
Tremendous stuff. Obviously, nothing can go wrong. Obviously,
nothing at all goes wrong. And so of course. It all goes wrong, and we'll sort of get into some of that. But yeah, when they start discovering there are some crazy characters hiding out in sort of underbelly of New York, it leads them on a chase, which basically reveals that maybe hubris is coming back to bite them in the ass, literally.
It's very, very good description. Very good description. It's I'm a person that's like very much into insect documentaries. It's a weird thing that I'm into because I'm like not normally that kind of, but the insect documentary I'm a very big fan of, and I love that. I don't know, it didn't need to, but there's these little moments where they really go into detail about talking about like insect anatomy and like sort of like the queen, and she's only got one husband who like has this, but those little moments. So I was like invested straight away as soon as I saw these little details about insects, and there's without spoiling, obviously, there's a moment where she, I think, dissects one of the bigger, like crazier cockroaches, and she mentions, "Oh, like it's got lungs," sort of thing. And then they didn't need to put it in, but they did, and I'm glad they did. And it's like, "Oh, why has it got lungs?" And then he jumps in, he's like, "Well, like insects don't have lungs. That's why they can only get so big, and that's why these ones are big." And I'm like, "Oh, that was nice. That was nice." Just throwing in that little sort of like, "Oh, that's why they're big. Well, they've got lungs now." So yeah, but for me, this movie said that it marries well with the director's style. But rewatching it, man, this whole thing just looks like a comic book, and I mean that in a very like admirable way. Like the alleyway scenes, the way it's shot, the whole, and it makes sense that he sort of leaned into the world of Blade and then eventually Hellboy. But his style just, like, it's got comic book written all over it. So yeah, amazing concept, and it looks absolutely tremendous. So that was my initial thoughts as a whole, anyway.
I feel like at the time it got kind of reviewed a little bit like, oh, it's just another generic, studio horror film. But I think that actually, retrospectively, that was probably quite unfair on it, because I think it has got a lot of style to it.
Oh yeah,
I think it's just films were more stylish in the 90s than I remember. But I think it's got a lot of directorial style on it. Very early on, he's a filmmaker that's incredibly visual, always has been, right from Kronos. Every film he's ever made has been very heavily storyboarded. He's a brilliant artist. Everyone knows that. And he's such a good artist that he can just create those storyboards that look beautiful. And it's got some great imagery in it. It's not a perfect film in the sense that I think it's very flawed, a bit like Alien 3. And lots of style, a lot of studio interference, I feel, on this one.
Yeah.
And if I had one big complaint about it, it's the ending. But I think, I don't know if you're planning on talking about that, but we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it as a rewatch. I thought it was great to come back to. It's got a lot of good ideas. And if there's one thing you can say, one word that you would use for Del Toro's entire career, it's creatures. Like his creature design is so brilliant in every film, and he designs them himself. That's the best thing. Like, this isn't like it's some other person. Like, he designs the look of all those, and he's always had this interest, hasn't he, in seedy underbellies with grimy creatures, and bugs just fit perfectly into that, because bug movies usually kind of bug me out. But actually, this one. I really love the concept of it. I thought it was just really great and really interesting monsters. Yeah.
And it's a good sort of contraster, because you normally find this, like, every now and again, like Hollywood won't release, like, you'll get a very original movie that comes out of nowhere, and then there's a similar movie that's released at the exact same time. And I don't mean similar in plot, but it's just like little things. And I think, funnily enough, this movie didn't get the credit it deserved when it came out. Like you say, it's just another generic. But what came out at the same time, so when I was rewatching it, I was like, it's just a hybrid cockroach man villain. And I was like, who did that better? And straight away I thought, Men in Black. That came out the same year with a cockroach villain. And it's not, in no way, I'm not comparing the two at all, because they're two completely different movies. But I just thought that was funny how they both came out the same year. And I don't know, did that one go under the radar? Because Men in Black, in some aspects, is a bit horror, especially the villain, who was a cockroach. And I just thought that was interesting, because you generally find that.
Yeah, that happens a lot in Hollywood, doesn't it? And you can only imagine someone at Dimension was just like, oh, I hear Men in Black is going to have a cockroach man in it. So,
like, what?
Yeah, I'm guessing, given the budgets, that Men in Black was probably in development way before this one was. But it's. I just think it was really original. Other than that, I hadn't thought of Men in Black, actually, funnily enough, but I can't think of anything else where that sort of hybrid human cockroach monster sort of thing has really been a thing. It's a really cool idea.
It's done so well. There's certain aspects in terms of originality that I have to have a go at. I thought, and I don't know if this is studio interference, they just thought, well, this has worked before, let's do it again. It was the relationship between the leading lady and the child. It was very sort of, it worked in Aliens. It's a very neat relationship, but my God, there is no chemistry between that woman and that child. Like, I think I forget the line that's said at the end, but there's a moment with the big heart going towards the child, and she says something, and she might have as well have said, "Get away from her, you bitch." Like, it's the exact same, but it's done so badly. You know what I mean? I'm just like, what was that about?
Well, I mean, this is on the list of my my criticisms about this. Is that I would categorize under the studio interference, because it smacks of studio interference. And like I said earlier, you know, the 90s was really bad for this in particular, I think. It was the beginning of that watered down horror. It was the beginning of that kind of 15 horror. You know, the kind of the 90s was rife with the kind of bloodless, goreless, you know, kind of horror that you could take, you know, the teenagers would go to for dates. You know, it's that sort of horror. Mimic, I think, kind of falls into that. I can't help but feel there's a few bits in it actually that were really quite squishy and good, and I really like them. And I feel like the Del Toro that we've seen since might have pushed things a little bit further had he been able to. But there were so many things in the film that just felt shoehorned in by studio mandate. I mean, I hadn't really thought of the relationship with the kid. I didn't even think of the woman and the kid as having a relationship, if I'm honest. I mean, you're saying about the Newt thing. That's interesting.
That's the point I was making, I suppose.
Yeah, I see the final scene. I think the very finale with the king bug or whatever it was, that kind of had a bit of a Ripley feel in it. But I think it was more the relationship with her and her husband. It was a bit, I don't know, I found that whole relationship a bit wet. And it's just, you know, it was... they hang the whole thing on this idea that she's pregnant, but kind of it literally just gets dropped in like the last 10 seconds or whatever. It's not relevant to anything.
On that note, though, really funny, because I watched this with my partner who hasn't seen it before, and when she gets bit by the bug, ridiculous, like this bug box she gets given by the children, she gets bitten by the bug. And then later she gets a pregnancy test and it's positive. And my partner looked at me and went, "Oh, is she going to have a cockroach baby?" And I was like, "Oh, that would have been brilliant. That would have been, no, she didn't."
What a movie that would have been, right?
Yeah. Very The Fly, very Cronenberg. Like, imagine, I was like, "Oh, that's that." But no, it's kind of got nothing to do with the rest of the story, to be honest. But there you go. Cockroach baby.
Yeah. It's basically that lazy character work, you know. And I think it's quite so interesting. I think if I've got one thing that particularly kind of annoyed me is the fact that it takes its cake and eats it a little bit, in that it wants to set up these characters as, like I said, the sort of hubris of man. Don't mess with nature. How could we do such a thing? Jurassic Park, basically. You know, it takes the Jurassic Park kind of storyline, but basically gives them this super happy ending, and they get absolutely, there's no negative that comes out of the fact that they accidentally released these human-eating cockroach monsters into the underbelly of New York. Like, it's such a wrap up, and that's where I just felt like at that point Del Toro probably just went, "Yeah, sure, guys, whatever," walked out the room, you know, because there's no way the studio didn't change the ending that he had planned. I don't know what he did have planned, but there's no way his ending was everyone lives happily ever after and they killed all the cockroaches. Yay!
The ending was hilarious, because I watched it from like a funny perspective, because she comes out and obviously Murray goes up and so tries to console her, but like I sort of like imagined that he actually was hitting on her at that point, because he grabs her. He's like, he definitely didn't survive. Like, nothing could have survived. And she's like, "All right." He's like, "Yeah, no, don't even bother trying to look for him." Like, no one was. He comes out wrapped in a fireman's blanket, and it's like it looks like they found him pretty safe, and then he just looks up. He's like, "Damn!" Like, I was going to get her there, but yeah.
Well, they had. I don't know if you felt the same thing, but when the kid's looking down the stairs, you see the kind of silhouette of the person. He actually says the line about the size 10 shoes, black or whatever. And at that point, I thought they were going to go, "Oh, great, one of the bugs has survived." And then it just turns out to be her husband. And I just thought that felt to me like they'd shot it to be the bug. And then the studio just went, no, sticking the shot where it's her husband.
Yeah, I know, I completely agree, because it did have the potential to be that way. And I mean, that leads me on my next point. Like, the kid, like, I'm a very... I don't like kids with gimmicks in horror movies at the best of times. It's just annoying. But this kid, like, a massive question that I have after watching this movie is, did they wear shoes? Did the cockroaches wear shoes? Because he talks about funny shoes throughout, and I've never really looked at that. I'm like, that's a point. Do they wear shoes? Because he constantly talks about these funny shoes.
Yeah, I guess they did. You know, and they've got trench coats on, right? Which you just hang over them, I guess. But the shoes. Yeah.
Funny shoes. I'm like, but I didn't really. Do they wear shoes?
I didn't even think about that. But yeah, no. How do they even put them on?
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that I do like the setup of that. I love the beginning. I love the way that, like, you know, it goes straight into that scene of the priest. You know, he's running. You think, I mean, immediately, you know, you're like, oh, it's a priest, poor guy. Oh, but you know, it turns out it's quite a dark side to that character. But it's I really liked that opening and him seeing it out the window. It's very of it, you know, we keep saying this, Jack, about links, but I mean, yet again, this is our second film in a row with kind of grimy New York, and you know, it's basically the New York. You know, it was getting better at this time, but it's when you live in the dark bits of New York, you know, horrible shit happens. That's basically what these movies say. And one of the things I really loved about this film was it delves into something I'm slightly fascinated by, because there's been so many films and books and all sorts of stuff written about, but that kind of underworld of New York, the labyrinth of the sewers, you know, you always get the steam coming out of all the grates and everything. But there's so many great films where they go down into those sewers, the abandoned train stations, you know, all that stuff. That really ticks a big box for me, and I thought all of that looked really, really cool. And it kind of opens with that, you know, and you delve almost straight into, oh, there's that world down there. That was a really good way to go in for it for me, because that gets me straight away. I'm in.
You used a brilliant word there. The labyrinth of the underground. It's exactly what we've been saying this whole time. Like, he had his style even then. He knew his path. Like, watching this straight away, you know you're watching a Del Toro film, and part of that is down to the underground subway scenes. Like, the acting, I'll go so far as to say the acting in certain bits isn't the best, but one thing I absolutely loved was the set design, and that subway that they were trapped on, as ridiculous as it might have been. I absolutely loved how that whole thing looked, and like you say, the underground scenes in general.
Yeah, it had. I mean, it was very sort of similar kind of lighting, you know, that he's used in lots of his films. Just really, he gives. I think he always tends to have quite expansive sets. Like like he can go claustrophobic when he needs to, but he can make a really big open space scary, which is quite hard to do.
Yeah.
Because obviously there had to have some light coming in to see something, and you've got that lovely kind of sky. It's almost like the glass, isn't it? That, you know, somehow is still letting light in. You know, they're under there, and that's one of the things that's always fascinated me about that side of New York, is that idea that you could be in so much danger, so close to people. And there's that brilliant shot where Josh Brolin looks up and sees them walking overhead, and you know that. He plays on that brilliantly. It's like they're in so much danger and nobody realizes it. You're walking over, you know, death and destruction, you know, and it's, and I think, you know, lots of films have kind of done that with that sort of New York anyway, but this one really felt, very much like his style was already in place. It's like the guy emerged fully formed, you know, as a filmmaker. It feels to me.
Well, I think it's a brilliant segue, to be honest, for discussing. I'll start positive and discuss my three top positives of the movie.
Great.
And it's exactly what you've said, to be honest. So I love that the vibe that I got from the get-go is that no shot was wasted. And I think the producer at one point even said, like, watching how Del Toro put shots together, it's like someone working out a mathematical equation. And it very much comes across like even someone just sitting, just talking to another, the way it's shot, the alleyway scene shooting down, very much like a comic, her screaming upwards, the big open spaces. Like, there is not one shot that's just like, oh, well, we need that shot in, or a fluff shot. Like, let's get that from several different angles during the conversation. No, not at all. Every shot, regardless of a couple of the movie's downfalls, which I'll get to, just looks absolutely gorgeous. And I've just like, it's a very, it's like white noise to the eyes. Just very, very pleasant to look at. I mean, what do you think on that point?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why some of it has stayed with me, even if it was only a few shots, because I remember at the time when it came out, like you said, there was a lot of just cheesy monster movie, bloodless kind of horror movies coming out.
Yeah.
There was things like The Relic and, you know, lots of films of that period. I didn't know who Del Toro was. Obviously, I hadn't seen Crocs at that point. But I remember watching it and thinking there was quite a lot of style. The stuff that kind of frustrated me about it was not the filmmaking; it was definitely the story choices, and it definitely felt because of that. It was in the hands of somebody who knew what they were doing, and you don't always get that with those kind of movies, especially in the 90s. You know, a lot of horror just doesn't quite hit, but tonally, it felt really interesting. like it just felt interesting. It had right up until maybe the third act. The third act. It's I was properly engaged with the story. Like what is going on? And it's creepy.
Yeah.
There's you don't get a more Del Toro scene than when the kid randomly just decides to climb out of his window and go across the road into the church and hang out with Bugmen. But, that scene, everything from like the mannequin, like the mannequins or something that have got like the plastic sheeting, and you've got the people with the trench coats in the shadows. You've got all the moonlight sort of streaming in, and the kids walking around. You've got the click of the spoons. It just was so similar to other great stuff that Del Toro's done. It's an amazing looking film for a £30 million studio picture. You know,
no, I completely agree. I think I was sold from the get-go. First shot opens up and it's a stunning shot, and it's one of those, it's very Kubrick in that it's a very simplistic shot that has no need to look as gorgeous as it does. And it's when you first open up on all those hospital beds, that cement shot, all those hospital beds. It's very like a very Catholic sort of vibes, and it's very cement, but the symmetry, and it's white, and it's just so like it grabs your eyes straight away. It's like, pay attention, the movie's starting, you know?
Absolutely, fantastic shot. And it reminded me that actually that's another thing that he's very, very good at is corridor spaces, like anything that's like got real depth and really long sort of sets. You know, he does that a lot. It's almost like you could tick list all the kind of traits of Del Toro from moments in this film. You know, definitely.
No, absolutely. You might discount this one because it kind of just it's kind of like a 1.5 point rather than my second thing that I loved about this movie. But I think it deserves credit in its own right for me. And you already said it before with the moonlight and everything, but it's very much as well as each shot looking gorgeous. I think what deserves credit in its own right is the lighting in this movie, the darkness and the light. It's just absolutely brilliant to watch. And I first got a sense of that when you first see, we're calling them mimics, your first mimic in the alleyway. And it looks like a man. It looks like a stalkerish man just standing in the alleyway. And the reason it looks like a stalkerish man, it's not because of CGI. It's not because of anything like that. It's because the shadows in that scene and the light and the little glare is being used to its fullest potential. And that is a theme that runs throughout this movie. And like I say, it is well shot, but at the same time, so much credit needs to go towards the lighting department. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that it's just great when you see shots in alleyway, you know, where you get the shadow, long shadow. It's just such a beautifully composed shot, and that's the shot that I remember. That's where the kid's looking down, isn't it? And you kind of it's just got a nice creepy atmosphere. It's got a kind of you don't know what's going on. And I think that's why the third act for me is so poor, because basically it loses all that mystique and kind of movie. Yeah, like it becomes another kind of siege, aliens-y, whatever sort of movie, you know. And I think it's a shame that because the human designs. The first time I saw it, I do remember just thinking like, what the hell is going on? Like, you didn't quite get it, you know. And I guess at that point, genetic manipulation wasn't really a thing that everybody's like so familiar with these days. It's just like, whatever, you know, extra arms, you'd just be like, genetics. But back then, it was just like bloody bug men, like.
Yeah. Right. No, and I guess that brings me on to my third point, my third love for this movie, and it's another one of the things that you say yourself, the director does so well, and it's like creatures or like monsters, and you've just said it there, which brilliantly set up this point. It's not just a monster movie. It's so unsettling, and it's so ahead of its time because it didn't belong in the 90s. It's not like a normal monster movie. To be honest, it's like the scene that I love the most is when Jeremy Northam's in putting the wires together, and it comes out, and you see this horrible thing that looks like a man, because it's obviously mimicking like a man, and then its face splits. And that whole scene was done practically. And for that reason, I was like, this is eerie as fuck, and it doesn't feel like a 90s horror. It feels more like sort of like an Alex Garland sort of movie more than anything else. So for that reason, the creatures, and I can't stress this enough, the practical versions of the creatures in the movie are so good and so eerie, so unsettling. and it's thanks to obviously Del Toro and his creations. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I think that's the strength. Not only is it the creature design, it's the fact that he always goes practical with those creatures where possible, and I think he's one of the very best at mixing CG and practical. But it's so that you can't argue that using practical for those bugs gives them such a squishy reality that just wouldn't have worked if they were like a full CG. These days, they probably would go full CG, and it's he wouldn't. But yeah, in another filmmaker's hands, they'd just gone, "Oh, kind of making CG bug people." But I think, I know where you're going with the CG. But I think, but yeah, he's just so good at kind of bringing out that. But they're just so interesting, the designs, like everything. Like it's the fact that it wasn't just one bug; it's like two together, or the kind of wasn't it is it their wings, or is it two? They're like two together, isn't it?
Yeah, the design, like I say,
wing shell kind of clicking together.
Yeah, it looks like a cloak, but like then they drop the whole. It mimics, like, because predators look like butterflies to attract prey. It's like these, like, we haven't seen them before. Like, how have we never seen these before? And it's like, no, we have. We don't, like, what they're doing is mimicking, like, and I love that drop, the title drop, they're mimicking, like, human beings. And then, like, say that face split just when he's alongside him, it just no pun absolutely intended. It like I felt it crawling inside of us that moment. It was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah. That was a brilliant moment. And again, that's another. I mean, this is just so many sort of checklist things for Del Toro. This, but he loves it's like the vampires in Blade 2, with the opening faces. This has got the kind of face that opens up. He loves kind of stuff like parting, kind of things that have like more limb. It feels like they've got more limbs than they should have, like when all the arms come out, wings and all that sort of stuff. He loves making those kind of creature designs. They don't feel like, like these days it's quite common. People tend to go down that kind of Cthulhu tentacly. He doesn't. I like that. He uses kind of stuff that you almost could believe could be real.
He's got his own style, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant style for sure.
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, what other kind of Del Toro isms did you sort of see in it?
Del Toro isms. I love that term. Well, I think we touched on it pretty already, but it was very much he's always drawn to creatures. He's always drawn to dark and grimy. He always manages to fit in some kind of labyrinth in one form or another. So obviously the underground, the subway. Yeah. The practical effects is him all over. Not one shot being wasted. So he's all over this movie from start to finish, and it's brilliant when you sort of see that filmmakers come into their own as time comes along. But this guy just clearly knew what he was from the start, and that's absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, that's it. I've never seen the shorts that he made before Kronos, but I mean, Kronos has got a very striking sort of visual look, and again, a really cool designed creature and really good take on vampirism. It's he knew kind of where he was going, but I think I'd love to know where that obsession with the world under our feet comes from, because I mean, you think Blade 2, Hellboy, they've all got that kind of subway scene, or kind of there's some kind of creatures under our feet kind of thing. The Hellboy film's filled with that. It's definitely a thing for him. This is definitely like a motif. It's how do you think? I mean, just I made the comparison with Alien 3.
Yeah.
Now, that was another great director making his studio debut. Now, do you feel that there's kind of a little bit of a comparison between the two? I mean, how do you think, if you took Fincher's first film, Del Toro's first film, do you think that there's any similarities between them? Anything, that they kind of do?
There was similarities in that I think there was a running theme of like sort of 90s horror, or certainly like darker 90s movies, like towards the end, before the dawn of the noughties. And I made this comparison, like the look and feel, the dark dankness, the misery, like there's always rain. But I even like sort of said this, I don't know why, but it was given as like End of Days vibes as well, funnily enough, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then that's when I started thinking about Alien 3 and the way that looked. And I was like, as much as the 90s was such an experimental phase in movie making, there's definitely like the 80s, but maybe not as drastic. There's definitely a very subtle theme running through in terms of style, like that movies like had similar to others. So for that reason, yes, it's similar to Alien 3 in tone. Certainly the dark aspects, and there's plenty of rain in Alien 3 as well. Just makes my point.
I think at one point actually that you brought up in the Alien 3 review, and I think it's worth comparing to this one as well, is the way that it feel. They always had to have something that felt like another movie. You know, Alien 3, you said about how it felt a bit like Terminator 2. It's like they've gone, a bit like Terminator 2. There's no doubt in my mind the ending of this one, they were like, God, the ending needs to be a bit like Alien. They definitely have this kind of studio mandate feel where they're going, yeah, we need a bit of this big film, insert name here, that was really popular for whatever reason. We need it to be a bit of that. And I feel that's the only thing where you kind of sense that decisions were definitely out of Del Toro's hands.
So I guess now that we've talked about a bunch of the positives and everything we love about this movie, but now we're starting to get into the whole let's make it like this movie, let's make it like that movie. So I think that's perfect timing for me to go into the three main things I didn't like about this movie.
Yeah.
So I've dropped hints throughout, and I know you've seen this coming, but is one of my favorite things about this movie is the creatures and the practical effects used for the creatures. Now, probably my number one gripe is the CGI used for the creatures. You mentioned that moment when, because up until this point, okay, there's a moment where you see the creature in all its glory and it stands up on the platform in the train. Up until that point, the thing I admired most about this movie is the use of light and dark and how you sort of see them, but you don't see them. And that makes it more sinister. And you see these like little parts of the body with blood and you're trying to guess what they are. And then the big reveal on the subway platform, a massive CGI cockroach flies at her and picks her up and flies off. And I was just like, oh, fuck off. Like we're going into the noughties, so I completely get it. And at that point, people were experimenting with CGI. And when I watched these kind of movies back then, I thought it looked great. I thought that CGI business looked great. I was like, wow, that looks amazing. But looking back now, it's just like that hasn't aged well in the slightest. I'm just like, I would have enjoyed that scene more had that just never happened. So the CGI in this movie it's mainly predominantly used for the creatures, for the more complicated scenes, I guess. I mean, when he's chasing on the platform at the end and he gets hit by the train, that run's ridiculous. But I'm going to stop because I'm seeing red. What do you think of the CGI in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, to leap ahead to that final fight, for what it's worth, I mean, it's not even a bloody fight. I still think a lot of this comes under the umbrella of studio mandate.
Yeah.
I don't reckon Del Toro would have gone with a cheesy, they face off against the king cockroach. It just feels so shoehorned in, where they've have a couple of lines that are like, oh, there's always a king. And it's like, well, for a start, anybody who knows entomology, like that the king is never the biggest thing. And it's normally like dead, after one mating or whatever. Like, the fact that they have this, oh, it's a king, it's like, oh, well, we had a queen in Aliens, now we've got
use the queen,
the least scary, poor CG bursts out, and you just go,
yeah.
And then, it gets hit by a train, and it's like, the way it runs, like
on two legs, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought that it is almost laughable. I think some of the CG is okay. I take the point, but I mean, it's the 90s, and 90s CG very rare, unless you like Jurassic Park, it very rarely holds up. I don't think it was any worse than like the CG of the Alien in Alien 3. I think probably a bit better.
I'm not saying the CG in Alien 3 was good either, though.
yeah, it's true. So it is a bit off-putting, but I think there was a lot worse. I mean, Christ, have you tried rewatching Anaconda? Wow,
yes.
that wasn't even good at the time. So yeah, I think I think the CG wouldn't ruin it for me, but I think it was more the choices they made for the CG where it's suddenly like try to make it more go big. It's like they went, oh, Guillermo, you've got to go big with this. Can't have a small ending. So when he suddenly climbs through that hatch and conveniently finds every single bug in New York City sat over a gas main, just ridiculous.
The LiDAR doesn't work. Of course it doesn't. Why would it? And it's like, well, I know what my plan B is. Like, oh, shut up. No, that's not okay.
Creates a spark that explodes, yet he somehow manages to dive into the water, which is that's my favorite filmmaking gripe of the whole movie. Is the fact that you get the explosion. Obviously, he's meant to die. He's meant to die at that moment.
He's not even.
I bet they got a second unit director while Guerrero wasn't even looking to just go, right, just get him diving into some water. Get the runner diving into the water. You can't see it. Just so we can slot that in. I bet they just inserted that, without him knowing. Because there's just, it's the most ridiculous shot. It's like, oh, he jumps into the convenient bottomless water that doesn't, incinerate him in any way. Like, I really like everything up until about the last 10 minutes. And then I think the last 10 minutes is horse shit. I think.
No, I completely agree. And I think you've been very kind with the words you used, to be honest.
Bullshit. It's bullshit.
No, I'm completely with you on that one. The last 10 minutes, and I mean, I guess him throwing himself into the water and stuff sets up my next point brilliantly, because I wish that he hadn't, because my second gripe in this movie is Jeremy Northam, your man that plays what I can only describe. He looks like a 90s Egon from Ghostbusters, which isn't Ghostbusters, but he looks like a very 90s version. It's the actor I've got a gripe with, because every word that comes out of his mouth, there's just no emotion in it at all. It's just like, I don't know if it was the dialogue, I don't know, but there's this moment where he's on the phone to her and the signal's bad, and he's like, Susan, the test was positive, Susan, and it's just like, I'm just like, what the hell is going on here with his voice? It's just I don't want you going back to work there, Susan. And that is the way he talks throughout the movie. I'm just like, Jesus, he's like, so I don't know if I've just got it in for Jeremy Northam or if that was actually the case. Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say there's a reason he's not had some stellar career since, right? I mean, I know he was probably in a couple of things around that time, but the guy is absolute charisma vacuum. My wife pointed on it. She just went, what a drip. Like, it's so unlikable. He's just this kind of clingy drip.
Yeah.
You just think, wow, what does she see in this guy? And he just wasn't very good. I mean, he brought no charisma to that role whatsoever. Because there was that cut at the beginning, isn't there? There's that jump head, 6 months or whatever. So it's all 3 years, isn't it? So it's like they met, they got together, they married 3 years later. But you just sort of think, wow, why is she with this guy? Like, it's just, everything about him I just found kind of just unlikable. Like, just there was nothing likable. I think if he had died at the end,
I would have liked him more.
Probably given him a good send off, because maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but it's like, if he had sacrificed himself to kill the bugs, and then that might have been I think that would have been a stronger ending. It's a bit of a cliche ending, but I think it would have been a better ending than him coming out and you just going, oh, lucky you guys, you get to live with your drippy family for the rest of the life. And can I just go on? So you mentioned earlier about that end scene with her and the kid.
Yeah.
Can I just mention as well? What? Like, that kid is nothing to do with them. His dad is killed in front of him. He's a poor autistic kid. His dad gets hauled up to the bloody rafters. Yeah. One of the better deaths. And actually, one of the only characters I genuinely was like, oh man, I wanted him to live. That guy. I really liked his performance. I liked the dad. And I thought that was a real, like, oh man, hauled up to the ceiling. Alien 3, but like at the end, they're hugging, and the kid just comes up and gives them a hug, like, oh, we're all one big happy family. It's like, what? And that, because that's such a cliche, right? It's like they become the new family unit at the end. Yeah. But at least in Aliens, there was a reason. This kid had absolutely no reason to go up to her at all.
Like, she did not like that whole like comparison that I made between Ripley and Newt and Susan and. Chewy. There we go.
Yeah, it was Chewy.
That comparison. They're trying so hard to make her care about this child, and it just doesn't come across. And one of the main reasons for that is when she eggs on the king cockroach. Get away from him! Get away from him! You bitch! And he turns and chases her, and she runs. She runs up, dodges at the last minute for The kid was on the tracks at this point. She does not turn around. She does not give a shit about that child.
Yeah, I guess they stuck that shot in at the end just so you realise he wasn't smeared across the face.
From behind the post. Don't worry, I'm fine. But yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, I actually didn't mind the kid. I mean, it's a, you know, that again, that's a proper kind of horror cliche, right? To have the kind of kid with the special ability or whatever. And I think at this point, but like, it kind of didn't really go anywhere. I actually liked the idea of the spoon thing. I thought that was quite interesting, but it kind of went. It didn't really go anywhere, you know.
Okay, well, I guess I'm on the other side of the same coin because I get it, but I already made my thoughts quite clear. Like, so my third and final gripe is the child, but there's numerous elements as to why. Like, I really think the whole this kid's got some like issue, some ability, or some like you know, in this case, the kid's ability is shoes. He knows how to tell shoe size. It's very, very clever, but. It's my gripe. I don't like kids with like gimmicks in horror movies because it's just been done to death. And like the whole kid that wanders off and everyone's got to go and look for them. And then, like you said, like at the end, they're all with the kid. But I just think like a lot of people wouldn't have died had it been for this child. Like, had it not been for this child, you know what I mean? So, well, you've made your thoughts clear already, but
like,
it wasn't for me.
Yeah, it was kind of, I suppose this goes to a bigger storytelling point. I mean, I agree, it is a big cliche. I think it goes to a slightly bigger storytelling point of just like the convenience of getting everybody together. It's like, I liked the dad and the son relationship. I actually really liked them. Like I say, I thought the dad was great. You know, I liked his character, and I think him going down. You know, he bumps into them because they're already down there investigating. She gets grabbed by the bug, and they all happen to end up in one place. I mean, I guess it's one nest, kind of makes sense. But it's like they really only brought the dad in, I guess, to just be a body at that point.
Funnily enough, on that note that you've just mentioned, when he bumps into them, this is a point that I didn't make, but it was hilarious. So you put a man, Josh Brolin, who's absolutely terrible with directions, writes them down on his hand and gets lost and meets his demise. And then this old guy just accidentally stumbles upon them. And then when they're on the train, he's like, oh, by the way, I've got a map as well. It's like, why did Josh Brolin have to die? you had a map. Like, how did he even get lost? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was when I saw he was in it. I was like, "Oh, this is great," because I don't remember anything about it, so I didn't remember if he lived or died. And it was quite. I thought it was a good death. Actually, I liked it. I do love in a horror movie a good somebody like about to get out, and then you know, away they go.
In the blood. I loved it.
The blood was good. And I think, like I say, I feel like they went for like a 15 horror with this. I think Del Toro probably would have gone harder on it had he had a chance, because he has in other things. But there were some definite moments of crunchiness in it. I think that was one of them where he was just like, yeah, good, okay. You kind of felt that depth. There was some brilliant sound design in that movie, actually. That's one thing we haven't mentioned. I do think the sound design was very, very good because you sensed they were out there by the movement, the sound, that kind of the flapping, you know. There was some great sort of little motifs to sort of tell you that the bugs were coming, and that was a good death for a young Josh Brolin.
Interesting the point you made as well about he definitely would have went harder because it's a 15 horror, but there are definitely moments where you're like, oh shit, like they went pretty hard there. And what scene that did that for me was this movie doesn't care about killing kids.
Del Toro.
It was brilliant. I was just like, oh, so, like it totally caught us by surprise. And I was like, but again, like Del Toro, yes, but for the 90s, that's like a big wow, especially when they put so much effort into saving this one kid. Yeah. It's just like, it felt like two different kind of movies were being made because, you know.
Yeah, and they kind of made them like likable street urchins. Little ruffians, you know, they were likable, they had a nice little banter. And then, you know, they kind of, that scene happened. I just was absolutely sure they were going to get away. I was absolutely sure. And then they get killed pretty brutally. And I was like, wow, fair play.
And I cared about them more than I cared about Chewie, just to be clear. Like, they had a lot more to like about them. And quite brutal end.
No, their only special ability, sadly, was to be very bad at recognizing bugs.
Well, to talk about those kids, that leads me on to my final point, which is my favorite quote of the movie. My favorite quote of the movie. Sometimes I have more than one, but in this case, there was only one that stuck to my mind, and it is by one of the child victims. So to set the scene, these two kids have heard about this bug woman that pays good money for interest in bugs. And they bring the bugs over and they show just the box and say, we brought this really strange bug. And she's like, oh, brilliant. And then she starts talking about the bugs to the kid, like how much she likes bugs. And they're like, that's gross. Ugh, like, don't want to hear about that. She's like, no, it's actually really interesting because of A, B, and C. And then the kid just comes back with the best quote in the movie. Well, whatever peels your banana, lady. It's just absolutely brilliant. I was like, that's not a thing. No one's ever said that before. That's not a saying. Whatever peels your banana, lady. That's absolutely tremendous. I'm going to use it.
Anybody can prove that Jack wrong on this one, I'd love to know. Was this like a big New York saying of the 90s?
Yeah.
Somebody let us know, please.
I'm going to start saying it regardless.
Whatever peels your banana. It doesn't sound good with an English accent. You got to have the New York.
Well, whatever peels your banana, my lady.
Just no, I don't think that's going to be entering the Mexican. But, you can try bringing it back, Jack. Let's try.
I'll bring it back.
Bring it back. He's bringing it back.
Yeah.
I think just to circle back round. I guess my probably one of my biggest negatives, other than the whole last 10 minutes, which is a shit show, is just going back to that point about the hubris. I think, in a way, the guy dying would have made sense because then at least one of them would have paid a price for kind of killing children and anybody else, homeless people, I'm guessing. They don't really get a sense for how many people these things have eaten, but it's probably a few, and it could have been many. It's like they used the gimmick of genetic mutation that Jurassic Park did, but without any of the fallout of Jurassic Park. Like, by the end of Jurassic Park, you're left in no doubt this was a bad mistake, and many people have paid the price. In this, it's like, we made a bad mistake. Yay, we're having a baby. It's just like... No
lessons have been learned at all.
No lessons at all. Nobody...
Even when he sacrifices himself, and like there's an explosion, it reaches surface level. Cars are set on fire. I'm pretty sure I saw a family car driving by. Everyone inside's on fire. What kind of sacrifice is this?
Yeah. But everyone will be cheering them. They'll just be like, "Yeah, they saved us again." Because they conveniently killed every single bug in the sewers. Apparently, I mean, what I love as well. It's a bit like. Do you remember when listeners, everybody, you wouldn't have known this, but about 6 months ago, I got Jack to watch a film called Slugs. And Slugs, if you haven't seen it, I won't go into it. Slugs is a classic, right? It's classic.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. That's it. I'm not even going to disagree.
Yeah, it's a classic of its type. But basically, the very end of that is basically the end of Mimic. They set fire to everything in a sewer, and they come out. Spoilers for Slugs. And they just go, "Yay, we got them all." And it's like, how the hell do you know?
The type of movie Slugs was. Slugs can get away with it.
Slugs can get away with that. But like when you're Mimic, you can't just come out. Where's the months of investigation, the teams of CDC going down there, checking every nook and cranny of the New York subway system? No. It's just like, no, one fireball, we've got them all. It's done.
Brilliant.
End of movie. And I hate those kind of endings in horror movies, and they were really prolific, I think, at that time. And it's just naff. The whole last 10 minutes is naff, and I feel like Del Toro probably walked off set for the last 10 minutes.
He disowned the movie. A bit of a fun fact: he disowned the movie in its original form, and he was allowed to go back and sort of do his director's cut. And he said, at the end of the day, if people still don't like the director's cut, at least I'm to blame. And I think that, like, not verbatim, don't quote me on that, but that was the general gist of it all. But he had issues with studio interference from the get-go.
I thought it was really interesting that, given we were only 4 films in, we had our first loop around on the chain. We've had first actor who could have actually been a chain previous, and
we could have got to Mimic sooner. Absolutely,
could have been sooner. So Charles Dutton, obviously Dylan in Alien 3, but yeah, he was brought in. I mean, the only thing I will say, I really like his character. I kind of, again, the noble death, but wow, the kind of noble black man death, isn't it? That's the thing. It's like such a 90s cliche. And in fact, we're only 2 years away from LL Cool J making a joke of that in Deep Blue Sea. Literally, I'm the black man, I'm going to die. And it's like, you absolutely see why that happened.
Yeah, I know for sure. Terrible disservice. When it came
Terrible disservice. I did like his character, though. I really liked his character as the only person of color in the entire movie. You know, I felt he was a good, interesting character. I liked him. He had some good lines. Nasty, again, talk about the body horror and stuff. Actually, that's where, again, a bit of Del Toro with the, you know, cutting him and then having to wipe goo all over his cut leg. And,
I thoroughly enjoyed the scene with them in where they go down, when they first go down underground, and they see all that stuff on the wall, and they just look to him and sort of say like, "Oh, you seen shit like this before?"
Why are you asking me if I've ever seen some shit like this before? Do I look like I've seen some shit like this before? Hell no, I ain't never seen no shit like this before. Who the fuck would want to climb up these walls and hang one of these? Must have been a big elephant ass motherfucker. I don't know the fuck.
Absolutely mental. Why would I have seen shit like this?
That was one of my favorite. Yeah, that was one of my favorite lines, and I thought, he was a really, really good character. You know, that got, you know, I mean, in that sort of movie, you're always going to whittle everyone away. But what I thought was really interesting was his death was exactly the same as Alien 3. Like exactly the same. He's on his back, holding the monster off. In this instance, he's trying to shoot it, but he's screaming as it's biting him, and it was like, wow. I mean, literally identical. The framing was identical. Everything. I just thought, wow, they couldn't be more original than that.
He didn't even have to rehearse for that scene. He's like, I've done it before. It's fine.
Yeah,
exactly.
And he just looked at the script and was like, really?
Oh yeah, okay.
But I liked him kind of going off and singing, and that shot was lovely as he walked up the slope with you had all the light. It was nicely done. It was just a shame. It kind of all rattled up. The body count rattles up quite fast. It's all happened in nearly 10 minutes. But I actually really liked all the stuff on the subway car up until they find the kid. I thought that was all good. The siege stuff, wiping the bug goo. Yeah, again, there were some interesting ideas in there, and that's where you get the scene, like you said, with Jeremy Northman and the glasses. That's a proper cheesy 90s thing, wasn't it? Using the glasses as a...
And then, but like, there's something I'm going to go back to another reason why I don't even think I hate the character at this point. I just hate him. But he uses the glasses as a conductor, which is brilliant, like you say. And then he's got no problem running through doors, like he can see fine. Earlier in the movie, he has to put there's an actual shot of this. Earlier in the movie, he puts his glasses on to talk to someone on the phone. Like, his vision is that bad. He answers the phone, he's like, oh, I got to put my glasses on. What were you saying? Sorry. And it's just like, but you can run away from the bugs fine at the end. You can jump perfectly through this narrow grid of water.
Well, I mean, and it just goes to show just how bad that ending was, because, like, my wife literally commented on that. She was just, because she wears glasses, and she was just like, hold on a minute, like, how's he even seen there's bugs there? How does he even know he's surrounded? Like, it's just nothing. He suffered no detriment whatsoever.
That spark is brilliant. He's got brilliant depth perception to create that spark. Ridiculous.
Dive into the convenient water pool. It was just, his whole character is just everything about it. I didn't like him. Quick comment. I thought Mira Sorvino, I quite liked her. I thought she's sort of generally, good in everything I've seen. I don't think there was nothing like massively standout about her. She hasn't got the kind of thing. She wasn't tough like Linda Hamilton.
I don't think
Ripley. She was meant to be vibes of Naomi Watts and people like that, I guess. But funnily enough, halfway through, I just thought, she really reminds me of Brie Larson. I don't know if that was just me, but there's a real Brie Larson-esque sort of thing about their face.
No, you mean,
stretching all the way through. I kept going, she really looks like somebody. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, I think otherwise, it's a decent cast, but I think that's probably a good time for us to go to ads and talk about F. Murray Abraham. So we're back, and great. This is a bit I really like this section of what we're doing, and because big or small the parts, I'm learning things about these actors, and it's a good excuse to do that. I like diving into these actors, like Brian Glover's. I seem to be picking the ones who have, had maybe not like the necessarily the biggest part in the movie, but. F. Murray Abraham. Let's quickly just get it out of the way, the mimic side of things. So I picked him because I knew, obviously he's a big name and he's in this. and is one of the top billed actors in the film. It was quite a surprise to me, especially because certainly in the director's cut, I don't know, is there a court scene at the beginning of the theatrical?
Yeah.
Where they're kind of announcing, that they've cleared the bugs and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
There's this like portentous shot of F. Murray Abraham, and he stood there at the back. And the reason I picked him and wanted to talk about him is because I've always found him a really interesting actor. Like, his face is just super interesting. He's got such a unique look and a very good character actor. And this shot made me think, wow, okay, yeah, there's some big secret he knows. Then he came in later on, and he's in the scene where she goes to see him, and it's a bit like he's almost like a confidant, and he is almost like the moral compass. He sat there with his arm around her, and he's like, what we did, he's that guy. He's he's almost the Jeff Goldblum, isn't he? Of the film.
Because that line in Jurassic Park, Life Finds a Way. I very much saw him as like exactly the same as you, Jeff Goldblum, and he even does this moment where he does this total Jeff Goldblum moment. He's like, evolution has a way of keeping things alive.
That's it.
Like,
yes.
That's the exact same as Life Finds a Way. I was just like, he's the Goldblum of this movie.
Sort of circling back around to ripping off from other movies. I mean, it's like, you can make it up. I mean, you're absolutely right. But he's basically that sort of Jeff Goldblum role. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And then her friend with the most 80s hair in the mid 90s I've ever seen goes to see him, and you think, oh, okay, well, how are they going to play into this whole finale? And then that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
He rocks up at the end. And do you know what? It popped into my head because it made me laugh, because I was just waiting the whole time for F. Murray Abraham to have some game-changing role in this movie. And then he just turns up at the end as she walks out. And it made me think of the monorail episode of The Simpsons where Spock, Leonard Nimoy is there. And at the end of the episode, Bart goes, but you didn't actually do anything. And he goes,
Didn't I?
And I just couldn't not think of that with at the end. I just felt like she was going to go, so what did you actually do in this movie?
Didn't do anything.
Wouldn't you like to know?
Yeah. Floats away.
It's such a
away.
His entire character could be cut from that movie, and it would make literally no difference, other than that one scene where he is the moral compass. Like,
it's so funny, and it's a testament to the actor. Like, all he has to do is stand in a scene. Doesn't even need to say anything. Your eyes are drawn to him, and as soon as you picked him, obviously for this episode, I was like, oh yeah, it's a really good choice. And I remembered that he was in the movie. And I remembered quite well, and I always thought that he was in the movie more, and that's, like I say, a testament to his acting, that he has such a presence that he literally only needs to be in a movie for 5 minutes to get top billing and to be remembered quite fondly for being in the movie.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been more of an example of character actor for this role, because this role was we just need a good character actor to make this character not just be really bland, because they could have just got any old,
really
to just do the role. But I guess there is the one thing I will say about him, and this leads nicely into sort of talking about, I think, F. Murray Abraham, is he is a great character actor. He's one of those great ones that elevates a scene when he's in it. He's never bad. He's never a terrible actor. And I thought the scene where he was doing the Jeff Goldblum was a good scene. I liked him. I thought it was very seen it before, but kind of his performance, very earnest. Everything about him was very earnest. Right at the end, I do love the idea that you said that, like,
he's trying to get around the
back.
He was.
To crack on.
Don't go and look for him. He's dead. I can see him right there. No, don't look. It's a cockroach, man. He's been bitten. He's infected. Come on, let's go home all together, like you and me.
But yeah. I mean, that aside, I think he's just an actor with gravitas, and I think that's why I wanted to pick him, because I liked that he popped up in Last Action Hero, and I was like, he's just one of those guys you see in stuff, and I've never. Because I still haven't seen Amadeus, I've never seen probably his greatest role, but I just knew him as a face that I recognised from lots and lots of stuff. And looking at his filmography, that's really the best term for him. He's just a great character actor.
He always just pops up as well, adds his finesse, and like he doesn't have to be in it, like doesn't even have to be a main character, but he always adds a great deal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so I didn't know a lot about him, so I looked up a bit about him, and he's got interesting background actually, because basically he is of that generation of actors like John Malkovich and Christopher Walken and people like that were part of the kind of New York theatre scene in the 60s and 70s. And they were all coming off the back, I guess, of your Marlon Brandos and people like that. The, quite honest street actors who were not professionally trained. And he was exactly the same. He was basically, he actually was saying, he lived in Texas and used to just fight and steal cars and just kind of, he could have gone, his life could have gone a completely different direction. And then he met one of those kind of Dead Poets Society teachers that changed his life, and he started doing drama. And literally off the back of that, they were like, you're really good at this. And he just moved to New York to be an actor. And it's really interesting because as soon as I found that out, I was like, yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? He reminds me a lot of those kind of actors, like your John Malkoviches, the actors that can just pop up. They can be in a couple of scenes, but they're always good. You can always rely on them, and then they don't necessarily, the whole film doesn't need to hang on them. He probably could lead a film, and he's had big roles in TV and things like that. But I think as an actor, he is one of those that just, he lets other actors also do the work, but it's just great to work with. And everybody was like, that I read, was singing his praises. He's a very good actor to work with by all accounts. What's really interesting is he had a really southern accent, and
really
that accent that he has, that voice that's very recognizable, he's almost like a posh American accent.
Yeah.
He trained into himself because basically he wanted to do Shakespeare.
Wow.
So he is the American equivalent of an RSC actor. But basically, he did stage, he did Hamlet, he's done all the biggies. He trained himself to sound more posh so he could have that RP style, but an American equivalent of an RP accent. So he could do Shakespeare and he still can quote sonnets and all kinds of stuff. So he's just a classically, a classic sort of stage actor who, but kind of without any of that sort of training. He never went into it to be an actor. So interesting guy. And I think his big breakthrough was winning the Oscar for Amadeus. And I was hoping to fit it in before we recorded this. And I just haven't had a chance. And I'd love to. Have you seen Amadeus?
I haven't, and I really wish I could have dug you out of this hole. But no, it's on the list for sure. I should have really been more professional and watched the movie that he was there, but it's on the list and it will be getting more.
I mean, it seems his breakthrough movie, and I know he obviously won Best Supporting Actor for it. The only thing I did find out, and if we can't really talk about the movie, I'll just say so we're not completely phoning it in, Jack. Is that so ever since he won the Oscar, basically every play he's ever been in, he hides the Oscar somewhere on the set. So basically, it'll be in a bin or under a bed, or
I love that.
And I just love it. It's like basically every single time he's done one, he's so happy he won one. He basically carries it with him.
Yeah,
I think that's really nice. That's really nice. Going on to a film I have seen, he was really good in Scarface, and I think gets one of the best deaths. I don't know if you remember this in Scarface, but he's the guy that gets thrown out of the helicopter. Omar, and that was a great character role. And I think what was particularly good about that was he's playing one of the gang, isn't he? And then basically turns out he's actually a undercover policeman, and that's why they chuck him out there.
That's probably my first movie that I saw him in. I watched Scarface at a very young age. Shock. But I remember that scene. I remembered him more than I did Al Pacino from the movie. Like, if anyone talk to anyone about Scarface, like, man, this helicopter scene, you need to watch it. So even then, from my first experience with F. Murray, he was immediately instilled into my brain.
I think actually that's the thing I will say about him is he's incredibly versatile. And that's why he's a good character actor, because he's got gravitas. He can be knowledgeable and wise and kind of a bit like Mimic, where he's that sort of, he's actually just the strong, the kind of the person that they turn to, guide, mentor, whatever he might be. And then on the other hand, he can play like a skeezy, drug, runner, and I think you look across his career, you know, he's been immensely versatile. You know, he can do everything from Shakespeare to sort of grungy characters. I think you know, another big one in the 80s was Name of the Rose with again Christian Slater, Sean Connery. So
Sean Connery, yeah. And it's funny that you said like he's sort of like Shakespearean acting really comes into play in that movie, because it's obviously about monks way back in the day. But it's funny because I think we made this point on Charles Dance in the last episode, in that he's the exact same in every movie. Like he's always unapologetically F. Murray Abraham, but he always adds something different. And I feel like he's classically trained acting, and the accent and everything. It plays so well into that role in The Name of the Rose. But unfortunately, he didn't steal the show away from Connery, because it's Connery. But another movie that he was in that immediately came to my brain when you chose him, and I think it's just like I'm not saying I'm disappointed you didn't choose this for this episode, because I very much enjoyed rewatching Mimic, but I am so sad that you didn't choose 13 Ghosts, because he is so good in that movie. Have you seen 13 Ghosts?
I haven't, I'll tell you why. It's because basically it came out at that time when there was just so many crappy ghost films. I just went, it's a crappy ghost film, and I just couldn't.
It's not. It's withstood the test. It's got a massive cult following now.
Really?
It's another sort of, massive cult following. A testament to practical effects. It's got such an original concept. It was like it's a very soft remake of a movie by the same name, but the makeup on these ghosts, because each ghost died in a tragic way. But your man F. Murray Abraham is a collector of many rare things, like coveted things. One of which is ghosts that have died in quite tragic. And he's got this massive like glass house that like contains them, like in these different chambers. But he plays such a sadistic swine. Like he's such a bastard in such an amazing way. So I think that's the main takeaway from this. You need to watch 13 Ghosts.
Oh wow! Okay, you might have sold me on that. I just assumed it was just like Ghost Ship and all that other crappy ghost stuff that was coming out, you know, House on Haunted Hill and all that stuff. And so I never even gave it the time of day. I never even bothered. But
everyone let him know.
Got me intrigued.
Watch this movie.
yeah, you've got me intrigued. Well, I mean, you know, I was hoping to try and find a few more. I mean, one of the things, I just quickly divert, but one of the things I am really enjoying about this, and I'm going to enjoy about the podcast going forward, is discovering these actors and trying to see more stuff they're in, because even if we haven't seen a lot of what's on their sort of resume, it's actually nice to be able to sort of go and find those films, you know.
Absolutely.
Because so I'll have to give that a try. I think that's what I liked about him. And just, you know, as I said just before, but you know, he is versatile because he can play good and evil, you know, and actually perfectly in Last Action Hero, you know, where he did that turn. You just kind of knew. Yeah. You knew he was probably going to be the kind of, if there was a bad guy in this, it was going to be him. But he's also a very likable guy in a lot of stuff as well. So it's not like he's not one of those people you would cast as a bad guy automatically, but he can play a bad guy.
But he can definitely play a bad guy. Yeah.
For sure. I think actually, you know, just about his voice, that is probably one of his most famous characteristics, because he's gone on to do a lot of voiceover work, because he was the voice of Khonshu in Moon Knight for Marvel. So did you see that?
I did see Moon Knight, yeah. And it's a perfect voice. It's very, makes such an impact.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to put it, yeah.
Basically, it's, to me, he's like a bit of an equivalent of, I think Charles Dance is probably a good equivalent of him, actually. Yeah. Like, he's an American version of a Charles Dance, or maybe not any level of an Ian McKellen, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's sort of where they just add that gravitas. And actually,
such a presence, and his voice is... adds to that, absolutely, is one of the reasons.
Yeah. He was always going to play a god at some point.
Yeah.
With a voice like that.
Absolutely.
So there we go. F. Murray Abraham. I haven't got a lot more to say than that, other than, you know, I'm looking forward to catching up with a few of his films. I 100% am going to be watching Amadeus, because it's been far too long. I've promised myself for decades I was going to watch that movie, and I've never got around to it. And I love the soundtrack. So yeah, need to get on that.
And 13 Ghosts, obviously, and obviously you're going to watch 13
Ghosts. the surprise edition of the episode, I will say.
Absolutely. Everyone, let him know in the comments how much he needs to watch this movie and how ridiculous he is for not having seen it.
And so, we come to my favourite moment. Right.
Yeah.
So Jack F. Murray Abraham, he has walked off with with the new post-Bug family unit and teleported away like Leonard Nimoy.
Hurry away. Yeah.
Hurry away. What are you going to put me through next?
So I picked someone that was done, in my opinion, a disservice in this movie. Like showing him someone that was born onto the big screen through movies such as The Goonies, a character that was amazing with directions, and then put in this movie absolutely shit with directions. Had to write them on his hand, just wrote left, right, left, right. So obviously you know who I'm going to choose, someone that deserved a lot better in Mimic, but I'm going to choose Josh Brolin.
Yeah.
Started out as a child actor in the 80s. I mean, he's been through all the different decades and starred in all the different types of movies that have come with each decade, and he had a resurgence in the noughties, and he's back and he's pretty much everywhere, and I absolutely love that because I'm a huge fan of Josh Brolin. But one of the movies I'm going to pick, and it was between his resurgence and sort of when he was just getting like movies down there, the movie that I picked is a movie that I'm a huge fan of, and that is Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror.
Oh, yes.
Part of the Grindhouse that either the former or the latter did Death Proof, but specifically Planet Terror.
Oh, Jack, brilliant. Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Because I've only seen it once. So yeah, again, really, really excited to revisit that. And you know, zombies are my jam. And I mean, yeah,
an absolute gore fest in all the right ways. Someone has a machine gun for a leg. We're both going to have a fantastic time.
Yeah, that's going to be fantastic fun. Great stuff. Okay, yeah. Well, there wasn't like a huge amount of choice in the film. I had a feeling you'd go for Josh, but but I'm really shocked you didn't pick Endgame because I know how much you love the Marvel.
Yeah. I think I've seen that movie enough, to be honest.
I don't think enough people have seen it. Little classic.
Yeah. And hopefully this will encourage people between now and our next episode to watch Planet Terror.
Yeah. And you're being very kind to me at the moment because I know for a fact, like, there are so many people in Planet Terror. I'm going to have trouble whittling it down, but yeah. That's going to be great fun. Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to that one. And I think that wraps up episode 4. Just a quick shout out for your channel, Jack.
So yes, once again, Chained is brought to you in part by myself, Jack from Jacked In. If you love movies or if you're a film fanatic, check out jackedinmovies.com. We've got articles, reviews, recommendations, weekly video shout outs by yours truly. And most recently, we also have had an interview with Northeast filmmaker Neil Marshall. So you can find that interview on our YouTube channel, on our website, on Spotify. Absolutely get involved.
Yeah, fantastic. And I can't wait to watch that. I've heard quite a lot of side stories around working with Neil Marshall because Stuart Conran, who did the effects in Off Grid and Still, he was one of his main sort of makeup guys on the descent through to Legion. So yeah, basically. Heard a lot of good stories kind of about making the descent. Well and
truly picked his brain. I asked him the questions that I've always been curious about. What did he think of the Descent 2, the shit sequel? What was his opinion on? I even asked him about Hellboy because it didn't turn out the way he wanted. So to find out all the juicy nitty gritty things that you'll have wondered about his movies, hopefully they get answered in this interview.
Yeah, please check out Dark Matter Films. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're already here, so please go browse, look at and support some of these other great up-and-coming horror filmmakers and their short films. Please send in thoughts, comments. We want to start reading some feedback out on the show, I'm sure, and we look forward to any of your thoughts and ideas.
Well, we don't have a permanent outro tagline catchphrase yet, so if you can think of one, I love a chain-related pun, bang it in the comments. But in the meantime, see you on the next link.